why this work is important, because it's interesting now that I've gotten attention and I've had opportunities to really share my work on a bigger scale. I had teachers tell me all the time, like, you're not a real teacher. This is like kind of secondary work. It's not important. But what I was trying to explain to them is like how kids feel determines how they show up. Right. And so if we're not tending to young people and how they feel, they're not allowed to show up in the learning and their full selves. And if you're creating systems that are undercutting how young people feel about themselves, then that directly impacts how they show up in the classroom, whether it's from overachieving and pressing themselves too much, or whether it's from, becoming disenchanted from learning because the experience feels so negative and feels so disconnected. So that's like my kind of mission statement is, or my why, right? Is how kids feel about themselves determines how they show up. So I can't even talk to them about any of the educational stuff until they feel good. Learning should be about growth. It shouldn't have to be about validation and safety. It should be more about how can I expand? To ask someone to learn and to grow is an ultimate act of vulnerability.
I tell teachers when we do this work, it's like, look, if you tell a kid to go up and answer a question at the board, you may think you're doing some kind of pedagogical experience to give that child a chance to learn in front of the room. But you also could be pushing that student into the danger zone of first, the vulnerability of being in front of people, of stage fright, of all the layers of what can happen when you maybe you're prepared or not prepared, making a mistake, what your meaning of failing is in front of people, and all the different things. Now, I used to do it to students. I used to tell kids to go to the board, and every once in a while, a kid would be arguing back with me. No, I'm not going. I'm like, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Yeah, of course you're going. Of course you're going. Right. And I realized as I look back to some of those days, I'm like, oh, in my mind, I wasn't trying to hurt the student. In my mind, I was trying to create a lesson that was engaging and had people participating and giving people opportunities to participate who don't usually participate. But I missed the possibility that I was actually putting people into a place of such vulnerability that it was unhealthy for them, that it was unsafe for them.
I tell I don't even know if I should tell it on this one, but I tell a story about that in one of the keynotes that I do with young people because I witnessed it. I witnessed how unsafe a young person felt when they were asked to go up and to show that they knew the answers when that person was very much in the learning phase. They were not ready to perform. And so a big part of my teaching was about we're learning and there is no, I have to be right. I have to look good, because in learning, the base is that you don't know, right? That's the whole thing. So I even had a thing where I kept a bell in my classroom and I would ring it when kids would teach me something just to normalize that we don't know everything and it's okay to ask and learn and to celebrate that. But, we often come up against, if you have one teacher that does, that's great. But then you also have all the other years where maybe you didn't have that, or you had a teacher that shamed or made you feel ashamed or embarrassed you in front of people. So it's tough to kind of even help shift that mindset, even if you have a wonderful teacher for a year that kind of works with you around that. So that's a big part of my kind of work, not just around academics, but also learning as a person,
Yeah. Well, I on this podcast, I've talked to several teachers. I love talking to teachers in this work because I think, and we talk to men because I think that I didn't get an opportunity to share what I was feeling growing up. My mom, I'll tell you what you're going to feel. You know what I'm saying? Like there was a lot of rules in my house around, and my mom had less of the rules about feelings than the streets of Oakland, because Oakland had clear streets rules about what it meant to be a man, and you don't get to show feelings. But in the house, we weren't discussing emotional intelligence. My mom she was talented. She was a teacher. I love her. I think she loved me. But I know that there were certain lessons that didn't happen there. What I've realized on the outside of home was that I was navigating a world that she had no idea about. Like no one ever came up to my mom and took her bike. You know what I'm saying? Like, so when I came home without my bike that time, it was like, she's like, where's that bike? And I'm like, well, let me try and explain. And she wanted to hear it. She's like, you better go back and get that bike. And I'm like, I didn't give it away. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I had some skills, you taught me how to cook and clean and wash clothes and fold dishes, or wash dishes and fold clothes. You taught me how to do all that stuff. That didn't work with the guy who told me to give me my bike. There was nothing. He wasn't asking for me to do some chores for him to keep my bike in my possession.
Yeah.
There was I don't know how to protect myself. I don't know how to fight. I don't know. And I think she did the best she could. But I think ultimately what happens when kids come to school and they're trying to navigate a world that they've never experienced, never seen, and don't really know how to navigate in a healthy way, you know?
It's interesting because I was just talking to two of my adult friends about that who are really struggling around trusting people's boundaries and listening and they were directly connecting it to their experience with their parents and what they taught them. And how that kind of impacts them now to this day. So I work with a lot of kids, but I also do this work with adults. And sometimes people are kind of confused, but in reality, it's just human work. You know, it's work that can be done at any age. My whole thing was like, what did I need to learn? And then how can I teach this to kids at an age that it can be more proactive so they can take better care of themselves? But it's hard when you're teaching young people these emotionally vulnerable skills and these things about taking care of themselves. And then you have parents or adults who don't know how to hold space for those skills because the way that they grew up and how they survived was very different, especially working with Black and brown kids and Black and brown boys, you know?